Hello, and I believe we are now live. Welcome back, everyone, to the webinar of Innovating for a Greener Future in Asia, brought to you by the Asia Network and also ERIA. My name is Amelia Litania. I'm Program Officer from ERIA, and we are here today for the second topic to discuss interconnected risk of environmental dangers and how we can address this risk. Now, to kick off our discussions, I'm very honored to have here with us Ms. Nidhi Nagabhatla to give the opening remarks. Nidhi is the senior expert of United Nations University with more than 20 years of work experience with specialty on water security and capacity development across the region. Nidhi, over to you for the opening remarks.
Thank you, Amelia, my co-panelists and all the participants who are joining us. First of all, let me take the opportunity to wish you a very happy World Water Day. It's on this occasion that we have now gathered here, and we are talking about interconnected risks. We are talking about environmental dangers that threat economic growth and viability, and water is in the center of this discourse. After nearly 50 years, United Nations is convening another big meeting to focus on water security for all, the interconnections of water sector with food security, with climate change, with energy security, and all the intersections that apply. With those words, I would also like to focus my attention on three keywords that was given to me to discuss during this intervention: migration, food security, extreme weather events, including water crisis and climate crisis. Well, we have enough data, information, and knowledge from academia, from think tanks, from experts, and institutions around the world to establish facts that climate change, water crisis is having a multitude of cascading impacts. Let me pick one for the sake of understanding: migration. Migration or human mobility, which could be voluntary or forced displacement as the result of too much water, too less water, droughts, floods, and extreme weather events like hurricanes, storms. We tried to establish at United Nations University in 2020. We came out with an assessment framework because we do understand that water crisis directly or indirectly can impact human mobility, but unless we have in-depth assessment at national level, at sub-national level, of how many people are impacted and how is water and climate crisis connected to these human mobility patterns, it's very difficult to establish a policy discourse in mitigating these issues. So an assessment framework that I can share in the chat later on after my intervention. The connection with food security was also drawn in the space or the nexus between water crisis and migration, because a lot of migration was happening from rural to urban, and its impact on food security becomes pretty obvious. There are some case studies from Asia that demonstrate that it could directly impact the local food security as people tend to migrate more to urban areas. While we have given enough attention to diagnosis of problems that we are facing as global humanity, we have, as a community, we should also be proud that we have also come out with solutions that can help mitigate some of these challenges that we are facing. Well, a big milestone towards that was Millennium Development Goals. I'm sure some of you may remember that we started the year 2000 with the commitment of 15 years as a regional commitment, as a global commitment to tackle some of these problems. Come 2015, we then agreed as a global community to implement Sustainable Development Goal, a much larger portfolio of commitments, not necessarily a blueprint, but some kind of guiding principles to identify common problems, to create a culture of exchange of knowledge between global north, global south, Asia, Africa, Americas, wherever best practices can be identified and scaled. And I'm proud to say, as a person of Asian descent, that Asia has been leading on several fronts in terms of application of technology in mitigating some of these issues, in providing these success stories of implementing nature-based solutions in tackling urban water security or creating smart cities, in identifying blue and green infrastructure projects, financing them through their existing financial systems like ADB, Asian Development Bank, or Asia Infrastructure Bank, that has taken a central role in investing, because financial channeling becomes very critical and important in realizing an idea to implementation. Socio-technological solutions that are tailored to the cultural context, to socioeconomic complexities. And recently, just yesterday, we had a discussion on how circular economy is also being discussed in this discourse. And in the context of Asia, there is an Asian Alliance for Circular Economy, and through that, they are also many Asian countries, including India, is also a part of Global Circular Alliance on Circular Economy for Resource Efficiency, that is led and steered by the European Commission and has brought together several countries from Global North and Global South, including many countries from Asia, to then have that platform where you can share best practices that can be applied sectorally. And I think with those words, I'll not take more than I am supposed to. I like to steer this dialogue on understanding interconnected risk, but also understanding integrated solutions to make the best of the commitments in terms of financial capacity we have, in terms of technological capacity we have in the region and in the states and at community level as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nidhi. And I'd like to again highlight the last sentence that you mentioned, about integrated solutions, because that's what we are going to discuss with the panelists. And we're really grateful to have your brief insights, because I know it's early in the morning for you to join us from Brussels. And I hope that we can invite you again to continue this very important conversation. So thank you so much, Nidhi. Have a great day for you. Thank you. So before I proceed to introduce the speakers, let me just remind the participants that you'll be able to post your questions in the chat box or grab the mic icon to speak during our Q&A sessions. So now let me move to introduce our speakers, as we have very amazing and great panelists. And the first speaker is Robert Brears. Robert is the founder of Our Future Water and an international water expert consultant with the UN Green Climate Fund. He is the author of 11 books, including Financing Water Security and Green Growth, published by Oxford University Press. And he's actually also the editor-in-chief of the Palgrave Handbook of Urban and Regional Futures. Welcome, Robert. We're happy to have you here. Our second speaker is Elyssa Ludher. Elyssa is a visiting fellow with climate change for Southeast Asia, ISEAS-Yusof Ishak Institute. Prior to that, she contributes to food security policy research at World Bank, Center for Livable Cities Singapore, and the Singapore Food Agency. Her publications also include Rich Food Smart City and Preparing for a Climate Resilient Singapore. Welcome, Elyssa. We are looking forward to hearing your insight. And last but not least, we have our third speaker, Dian Lutfiana, or Fia. Fia is actually my colleague here in ERIA, and she is a research associate at Energy Department and currently involved in various energy and development research, including low carbon energy transitions and Asia carbon capture, utilizations, and storage. She previously also involved in various energy projects, including market-based policy options for energy and industrial sector. Hi, Fia. We're excited to have you here. So, as Nidhi mentions that actually today we're celebrating World Water Day, but we're still facing an unseen pandemic, in a form of climate change and its impact on water security and growing water demand. So I like to turn to Robert to see your perspective, on how do you see the stage of water security today, and how can we enhance effort to tackle global water crisis? Over to you, Robert. I think you're on mute, Robert. Sorry.
Yes, that's fine now. That's better.
Yes.
Thank you for the kind introduction. So basically, we've got this crisis happening, and it's driven by climate change, but also other mega trends driving the water crisis as well: population growth, rapid urbanization, global economic growth, etc. So we have this crisis of water quality and water quantity as well at the same time. So we can see in Australia, 1 minute you can have a flood, the next minute you can have a drought, and often we have too much water and then they have too little water. This is a really problem because basically, and what I do is looking at behavior change. So essentially, we need to focus on how we change our behavior towards water. We're facing water scarcity from climate change, but also from rapid economic growth and, rising middle class, changing diets, etc., etc. So we need to, in all types of countries, focus on managing the actual demand for water. So basically, we've got limited and often variable supplies of water. We could be in the middle of a flood and have water quality challenges, which means we need to have water conservation. So it's not always the most obvious time we need to conserve water. We had floods in New Zealand only a few weeks ago where the wastewater treatment plants were no longer functioning anymore, meaning people had to conserve water. So we need to start thinking about how we actually use water, and then we need to change. And that's just right across the board, across all sectors, the domestic, industrial, agriculture. No one's immune to behavior change, and so that's my very short take on how we need to address this challenge. We need to always remember that it's both climate as well as human-driven, our scarcity. So the world has a finite amount of water. It's never changed. It's not going to increase any more or any less. So population grows. But if we, implement the green economy or circular economy, all these different types of things, we can decouple our economic growth, our population growth from water consumption. And then we start focusing on adaptation to deal with our climate issues, and as well as the water sector itself is a driver of emissions. So we need to start thinking about how our usage of water itself is driving the global climate change as well. So, in a very short nutshell of how I see it.
Yeah, and I think it's very interesting because you also mentioned that it's also related to behavior change, right? And there's another sectors that is equally important. And Nidhi mentioned a little bit in the beginning, it's all interconnected, and not only water, but also connected to the next important sector, which is actually food. And with that, I'd like to turn to Elyssa, because this is something that you've been work a lot and research a lot, and I find it very interesting as well. And again, from your perspective, how are the food system influencing and being impacted by this climate change, the changes, the crisis that are happening around the globe, and especially after now that we are trying to have build back better after the post-pandemic recovery. So what changes do you see that here to stay, and the barriers that are still standing in the way? Over to you, Elyssa.
Thank you, Amelia, and thank you, Robert, for that sharing the key issues that are facing our world today, especially the megatrends. And of course, there's no food without water. So water is a very important part of our agricultural system, and also making sure that we have enough to eat. Sadly, I regret to say that I think many of these, very high food prices and volatility in food supply will continue to be a problem for many, many, many years to come. I think a lot of people think that it's only a temporary thing, but unfortunately, because of some key trends, we actually will continue to face supply issues. So there's you've mentioned two of the items that are affecting our food system now. The first is the pandemic, and then the second is climate change. There's actually a third, but I'll go through the first two. For the pandemic really affected our supply chains because not only were the supply chains broken and fertilizers and inputs could not get to the producers, but also produce was left on trees and fields, and this has affected our stockpiling in countries, and it will continue to affect us as we draw down on those stockpiles. At that time, I think the biggest challenge was shipping costs skyrocketed, which put a put a highlight on the globalization of our food system. Pre-COVID levels, the Shanghai LA shipping index, which is one of the key indexes for shipping, was about $2,500 for container, but it went up to more than 12,000 during the height of the pandemic. Today, it's back to 2,500 again, US dollars. So that and also other pandemic-related issues are no longer as apparent. However, then came climate change, of course. There were so many disasters over the last few years, not just floods, but droughts, heat waves, already hitting the poor people who are producers, who are actually who previously experienced the effects of the pandemic and then face the effects of all of these disasters. And you may have seen that the AR6 synthesis report was released recently, and it states that if we keep to business as usual, we will overshoot our 1.5 degree goals. Scary thought, considering we're at 1.1 now, and we already see their disastrous effects. So we have 7 years to 2030 to make those changes. Otherwise, not only will climate change continue to impact our yields, but we will continue to pay higher prices at the supermarket. We'll also see that the impact on the availability of foods all over the world will be impacted. And we don't even know what will happen if it continues to 1.5 degrees. The last, which is really affecting us now, is the Russian invasion of Ukraine and its lasting effects. At this time, we hope that it will end soon, but pointers indicate that it may not. This has impacted on our fertilizer, wheat, and sunflower oil. Russia and Ukraine together, for example, produce about 28% of our fertilizer that is made from nitrogen and phosphorus as well as potassium. Prior to COVID, the prices of fertilizer were approximately $300 US per ton. Today, it's 4 times the price at $1,200 per ton. This means that farmers have to spend at least 4 times more for the same amount of fertilizer. And if the farmer can't afford it, then they will put less and yields will be compromised and drop. And most of the time, because farmers can't pass this cost along up the value chain, then they actually reduce their production. And this is what we're seeing now. Yields have reduced significantly. So unless we change the ways that we currently operate in our agri-food system, we will continue to see climate change as well as the effects of the war, as well as the effects of the pandemic continuing to impact on our food supply and prices. And hopefully that will change, but we need to work harder at it.
Thank you, Elyssa. And I think the key message is actually no business as usual, and then we need to change to have better solutions and to deal with this geopolitical uncertainty as well as climate change as well. And I think now I would like to turn to Fia, because I know, Fia, that you work a lot on energy sector in our department, and I believe carbon emission reductions also become increasingly urgent to counter climate change, and many nations have announced net zero emission targets and commitments, including ASEAN. So what do you think are some of the main barriers in achieving net zero emissions, particularly for developing and also emerging economies? Over to you, Fia.
Thank you, Mel, for the question and having me for this discussion. I think energy also is important, and there's a nexus between food and water within this system. And then we all know that every country, especially in emerging economist countries, has a burden to move from transition from the carbon intensive technology to the low carbon technology or renewable energy. And we all heard that after COP26, countries pledged to commit to having a net zero and carbon neutrality target. And then to achieve that target, there are lots of barriers that are still facing the countries, especially on economy, financial, and technology, as well as in institutional barriers. So we have know that option of renewable energy and low carbon technologies are there. But the challenge is on how choosing that technology to fit with the country needs for fulfilling the energy demand. And then from the financial sector is the high cost of low carbon and renewable technology also hinder the effort of the transition. This is part of the result of the lack of supply chain of the technologies, and then this economy of scales and reliance of imported equipment and products to provide the renewable and low carbon technology. And also there's still the restricting the availability and accessibility to access the renewable technologies. And another challenge is about how to maximizing the technology that already exists, and then how we can get the support from the international or regional to explore and utilize this opportunity to implement and to install the renewable and low carbon technology within the countries. Because as we know that the emerging countries are still struggling to develop the country to fulfill their needs, but the the support and then the force to transition from the fossil fuel to low carbon technology also difficult for such a countries. And then the government also the key to provide the policy framework and the institutional framework to have the environment to enable the environment of investment to attract this technology, and then to support to having a support from the, let's say, private and then international institution to support this region and countries. Yeah.
Thank you, Fia. And that's very interesting. You mentioned a lot about choosing the right innovations and technology, and especially some of the main barriers that we're still facing in ASEAN countries and developing economies. I'm also curious to ask the second round of questions to discuss a little bit more about innovations that is happening across the regions. And maybe I can go with Robert first, because I know that you also involved in research regarding innovative water management, and that's something that you've been working on. So what are some of the key takeaways that you see in terms of innovative water management, and what are the challenges for the future? Over to you, Robert.
Yeah, I think in the context of cities, we need to manage our demand for water a lot better than we are at the moment. And also by innovation, it also means not just technologies, but policies as well. So water policies that promote water conservation and water efficiency of homes, as well as the technological solutions. And also that needs to be extended to businesses and commercial properties, industries, all water users in cities. So it's interesting when we think of innovation, we always think of new technologies, and also innovation can also mean policies, but also might mean innovation that's new to the city. It might be being done everywhere else in the world, but it has never been done in your city. That's still an innovation. A lot of people think innovation means it has to be brand new, never seen on Earth before. Actually, there's many types of I think it's about 7 different types. It might be new to the market in your own country. It might be new to the region of the part of the world. It might be might be innovative to your own organization. It might be a water utility that's doing smart meters for the first time. It's still an innovation, and we need to think, as well as policies, that we need to put policies together. They need to be smart. We talk about smart water management, smart technologies, but our policies are quite often dumb. So we need to think about smarter ways, water pricing, regulations. How are we encouraging people rather than just top-down command and control? Using market-based instruments, pricing the water, encouraging water trading. These types of thinking needs to become more mainstream. And also we need to think about, I mentioned economic regulatory, but we need to, of course, technology as well to manage that rising demand for limited and often variable supplies of water. So that goes back to water pricing, it goes to smart metering, also water audits of businesses. They all play a key role in reducing demand for water. And also, we can develop competitions between water users. In New York City has like a challenge for universities, has a challenge for restaurants, has a challenge for different types of businesses to try to save, for example, 5% of water or 10%. And putting that into the public, it makes businesses put basically the money where the mouth is. They're showing they're also reducing water consumption, because often it all falls on the individual. But if businesses take that lead, corporate social responsibility starts kicking in, and good publicity, and also being major water users as well, it showcases what can be done. So when it comes to climate change, we also have to worry about too much water. So we've got localized flooding. That's where blue and green infrastructure needs to be coming into play. Our cities need to be developed a lot smarter than they are at the moment. Instead of water just washing off car parks into the drains out to the sea, that's harvested. We can harvest that water for a dry day. So we need to start thinking about also how is it protecting our water quality as well. If we install blue and green infrastructure in cities, we're protecting waterways, the quality of water that's going into the oceans, that stops eutrophication, dead zones, etc. And we need to start thinking about how all these, incorporating them into a lot different ways than what we are at the moment, but it also means smarter policies, how to integrate blue and green infrastructure into transportation, into actual other sectors. Water utilities are usually only dealing with sewer lines and, water pipes. But when they start having to work with Department of Parks and Recreation or with the local transportation authority, that's when things get more smarter. Where we start bringing together and seeing it not just isolated. We talked about food and water before, food, energy and water. We need to stop managing it as an individual thing. We manage water, you manage food. It's both connected. So we've got to somehow, in the context of cities, we also need to do that. If we start thinking about water as using energy, and the water utilities start needing to work with energy companies to start reducing the energy demand, which goes back to demand for water itself. So we need to start, it's not all about just technology, it's also about smart thinking. So that's just what I'd like to convey is that let's not rely on technology too much. Let's also start thinking smart as well. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Robert. And I think it's very important to emphasize that we need, as you say, smarter policies, and that we cannot manage all of these things, efforts individually. It has to be, all multi-stakeholders need to come together to solve these issues. And I think it's very related to what the questions that I want to ask Elyssa is because that you work a lot with the government previously, to help them with the policies that that can work in Singapore case. So my question is, what are some of the example of policy initiative that you can share with us and other ASEAN countries be able to learn? Over to you, Elyssa.
Thanks, Amelia. I wanted to reiterate what Robert was sharing just now about the importance of smart not being new technologies, but really taking on some of the tried and true solutions that we've already created. So many are already available, and that's one of them is basically setting a vision, setting clear policy. And I'm happy to say that because of the pandemic and also because of climate change and its effects, one key result was that now all over the world, countries have established comprehensive food security policies. And these have been even incorporating the cities where, anywhere between 60 to 80% of our population currently live. So it's a key part of our food story and our food system. Previously, much of our focus on food policy was about agriculture economics and production. Now that has changed, shifted to be policies about supply chains, food insecurity in not just the rural area, but also the urban areas, nutrition, diversity of food, food waste minimization, climate resilient R&D, and others. This has been reflected just in our region. I mean, Singapore has its 30 by 30 policies and also its Singapore Food Story policies, but Malaysia has also released its Food Security Policy Action Plan 2021 to 2025. And its National Agro-Food Policy Plan 2021 to 2030. Indonesia, Philippines, Thailand, and many other countries have also developed very comprehensive food security policies. So that's the first thing. I'm glad to see that there's comprehensive national food security policies which sets the vision and ensures that every department, every agency that is working on food is able to work towards us ensuring that food security is a priority. Secondly, I think one of the other important things that have resulted is climate resilient agriculture has been improving. There's more focus on seeds and practices that reduce impacts from drought, salt intrusion, and flooding. And we're taking a lot of inspiration from traditional practices as well. Thankfully, agroecology, permaculture. Sustainable aquaculture, restorative aquaculture practices. This has improved our ecosystem health. And one of the other things that have gained a lot of interest is urban agriculture, ensuring that we have produced food within our cities. It's now an integral part of our sustainable cities plans. This not only focuses on production of food, but also community well-being, flood management, water-sensitive design. And because of that, we are now seeing that people's relationship with food is improving. One of the key things that ASEAN countries can do to improve and what Singapore can contribute to is really about food safety. I think one of the challenges that Southeast Asia and the world will face is that as we have more impacts of climate change, disease, etc., we need to really look at our food safety. And Singapore actually has a very good food safety framework and strategies that everybody can learn from. The other thing that Singapore can also contribute to is creating regional cooperative platforms so that we can find solutions together, such as circular solutions or stockpiling. So I think we can all learn from each other. Every country has something to provide. Every city has solutions. And the key is to be open to them and to learn from each other.
Thank you, Elyssa. And I'm seeing a lot of, new insights, not new, but more broadened insights, that ASEAN can learn from each other, can collaborate from each other, because again, as you said, it's very important to look at policies across the globe, what's happening not only in ASEAN, but also other countries doing, and we can actually learn from that. And maybe I'll go to Fia just to, to ask, what are some of the, in terms of green innovations or other policy-related green innovation policies that you see emerging in ASEAN countries? Over to you, Fia.
Okay. I agree with the other panelists mentioned about how changing behavior, smarter innovation can be affected to our moving forward for innovation. And then for the energy itself, like previously, the country used to heavily focusing on economic recovery or innovation, but right now the low carbon has already put in place to any national plan and then policy. So I think it is important to have a smarter innovation in terms of energy innovation to create more green jobs, to create more competitiveness between amongst the countries and the region. And then indeed that each country has a different approaches towards what they need, and then towards their capability to meet the demands and the supply. And then I think for the energy sectors, that promoting green growth measure will be critical to mobilize the investment for energy sectors, especially like the green stimulus package can be part of the low carbon green growth to support the long-term targets, especially to build back better from the COVID impact. Because as we know that due to COVID, there are lots of energy investment has been postponed and then been replaced to recover the economic and health sectors. But then to avoid that our country move back from draw back from our target to 1.5 degree targets to be the better one, and then so that we need to push forward this recovery and innovation, and then how the country can speed up this innovation through, for example, more engaging stakeholders and the government, and then having more public-private partnership to invest in more energy sectors and low carbon technology, something like that. So yeah, and then another factor also, collaboration to boost this innovation. It's also important to explore what's the suitable, what's the viable technology or policy or market that can be support the government and then the country to develop and explore what's the complex or advanced technology that they can install and then utilize and mobilize within the countries. So I think the key of innovation is not only the technology, but also the support from the government, the institutional financing, as well as the society and community to make this innovation can be implemented.
Thanks a lot, Fia. And I'm actually now will be opening the floor for any questions that participant might have. So feel free to post your questions on the chat box, or there's a mic icon at the bottom of this platform. So feel free to also use that. In the meantime, I think the last points that Fia made about collaborations and partnership, and also we've been heard that a lot since the beginning of our discussions. And then I would like to maybe discuss it a little bit more again with Robert, Elyssa, and Fia. What's the best way to approach this interconnected risk, in terms of ensuring there's an effective and successful collaborations, between private sector, public sector, and also, others to achieve food security, water security, as you said, because it's very interconnected to each other, and also energy security. So maybe I'll go with Elyssa first.
Well, the key thing I think that is required to ensure that there's integrated solutions is that we understand that every system affects each other, and that there needs to be collaboration between the different government agencies and departments that deal with water, energy, food issues. I think one of the biggest challenges in our current system today is that our governments that tend to work in silos, and when they don't talk to each other, then there's no recognition of the challenges each other faces. And once having a comprehensive policy, like I mentioned before, each country is having now about food policy, to have that similarly on energy and water is priority, and so that they can understand what are the challenges that each other faces, and then work together, hopefully, to solve some of these issues. Some of the and policies are so important to support innovation and economic growth. Private sector is unable to move forward without understanding what is their without seeing a runway. Nobody's going to put down millions of dollars if they don't know whether they're going to be able to keep their farm or keep their technology safe for the next 10 years. So one of the key things that we need going forward is more engagement, more collaboration. We need to have deep thought when introducing new policies. So some of the important policies for food, for example, is to encourage diversification of imports, but also to prioritize local food production and self-sufficiency. And then the last one is also to ensure that there is enough intel about food safety challenges in the region as well as globally. And policies such as food protectionism that doesn't allow food to move forward, to be exported, actually most of the time it has unintended consequences that seriously impact on producers in a negative way. And it should be taken only as a last resort once all of these consequences are properly mapped out. Often we take on these solutions without understanding the the marketplace. So one of the other key things is because policy directs a government funding, and it also gives confidence to investors to provide funding into a country. So one thing that is key for Singapore, for example, is that because it highlighted that food security was one of its huge issues, they then over the next, until now, they've put $300 million more than 300 million Singapore dollars since 2012 into not only food production but also R&D in the form of grants or loans, etc. And these have attracted numerous agri-food companies to Singapore. You wouldn't consider Singapore an agricultural country, but it has attracted considerable amount of funding because there is a serious effort to do so. It's attracted alternative protein, novel food startups, R&D, and this has contributed to a very vibrant economic situation here in Singapore for this industry sector. And I think, there's so much that governments can do to signal that they're open for business, and this is one of them, having comprehensive policies that are welcoming of the private sector involvement.
Thank you so much, Elyssa. I think you pretty much, say all of the important key messages that we need to learn, in order for us to have not only better support in terms of policy, but also work together in implementing this policy. And I think we're running a little bit of time, but I'd like to give a floor to Robert and also Fia for the final thoughts on these issues, on the topic that we're discussing this morning. So perhaps over to you, Fia, and then after that to Robert.
Thank you. Okay, so for my closing speech, I think for energy itself, it is important to engage every sector and then every stakeholders to find out what's the best solution, and then how to boost the finance sector, policy, and then community to work together to bring this new technology and then new technology to be in place. And then again, reiterating what Elyssa said, that policy is the key, and then is the key to boost everything, including the investment, to attract the private sectors to help the countries to support this new technology to be available. Yes.
Robert, perhaps you want to say the final words?
Yeah, I think I saw my question was, from my experience, efforts to promote and ensure access to clean and safe waters. And just briefly, over the last 12 months now, our Future Water's been doing quite a few different unique reports of other organizations and looking at, the unobvious, connections here. So we collaborated with State of Green, which is Denmark's government agencies initiative to promote Danish technologies, and they focus on a lot of water technologies. So we did a report that showcased, we talked about the general trends of the world, and then we also talked about actual solutions provided by corporates and organizations. So it was a nice way of getting out to a global trend, but also having physical solutions to the problems. And also with the Water and Climate Coalition, which is under the World Meteorological Organization, we did a report, Climate Resilient Water Resource Management, and there's about 50 members of that coalition. So what we did was we got each member to submit just a general 1,000-word, what are they doing in their projects or organizations, but not, propaganda essentially, but actually lessons learned, best practices, to then showcase what they're actually doing and lessons learned for other parts of the world. So in these kind of reports, what we're trying to do is not trying to just showcase this is what company X does and this is our products, we can solve this problem. Trying to get people to actually show leadership and thought leadership. So getting an organization to actually say how we're actually going to solve this problem, and this is what we see the future to be. And by the way, we sell this technology. So this is what we've been trying to do, is trying to get, bring this public and private together to solve the challenges. And this is something that we've been driving the last 12 months now, trying to get corporates to, address global solutions without actually selling their own product for a few minutes and getting the discussion going that way. So that's what I've been trying to do. And we've been a couple of reports that come out on that. So that's This is the way. So basically, education and awareness raising, best practices, the lessons learned is what we're trying to really showcase in different types of climates, different types of levels of development, everything, global best practices, essentially, what works in, and it also can go the other way. We're finding something that happens in India can actually be applied in Netherlands. So it doesn't have to be one-way traffic here. It's actually both ways. And we understand that, the Danes are learning lessons from, from Vietnam and other countries because they've got more extreme weather systems than Europe does at the moment. But Europe will be projected to have that types of weather forecasts in the future. So the Dutch are learning from Jakarta of how extreme weather can actually create, even worse conditions than what the Dutch are facing. So the lessons go each way now. We're not just one-way traffic. It's actually, New Zealand can learn a lot from many countries around the world. It doesn't matter anymore. We're all facing this extreme weather together. We're trying to learn from each other. So that's my final.
Thank you, Robert. And I think that's a very great note to end these discussions, because I think that we need to keep this conversation going. And as you mentioned, all the panelists mentioned that interconnected consequences of this climate change crisis calls for integrated actions, because all that is happening to us right now, let it be energy, food, or water, that all sectors are interconnected, and we are facing the same threat. Let's call for collective actions. And I thank all of the panelists and also participants who joined us this morning or afternoon time, wherever you are. And we hope that we can connect again to you all soon. And thank you again, Fia, Robert, Elyssa. Thank you. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you
Thank you,
very much.
Amel. Thank